Hello everyone, happy Monday. Today is going to be a very productive day. I have my to-do list right here. Let's see. First, we need to bake some bread for a crostini party that we are hosting later this week. And then we need to jar up and vacuum seal the granola that I baked at dawn this morning. We are going to harvest and preserve some of the garden produce. And, well, we shall see where the day leads us. First, however, I need to finish my coffee, and then we can head into the kitchen. For the bread that we will use for crostini later this week, I think beer bread will work very well. You and I have made this bread in the past, but we're going to make it again today, all right? And the first thing we need is 555 grams of either all-purpose or bread flour, and I'm going to weigh this out here. 550 grams should equal 4 cups of scooped and leveled flour. Then I need 2 teaspoons or 7 grams of active dry yeast. And 2 teaspoons of salt. This is a half teaspoon here, so I'm going to add 4 of these. Going to whisk these dry ingredients together. Then I need 12 ounces or 341 mils of some kind of beer. You can use any beer that you like. I'm using Murphy's Stout today. I'm going to pour that in, along with 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. There is no sugar in this bread. And then we need to stir this mixture until a shaggy dough forms. In other words, just stir until the dough becomes so stiff that you can stir no more. You can mix and knead this dough in a stand mixer if you prefer, but I need to burn calories, so I'm going to knead the dough entirely by hand. I'm going to knead this on my marble board. Now, the reason I love beer bread is because it has that wonderful tangy taste of sourdough without the trouble of having to make a sourdough starter. And when I've made this bread on video in the past, I always hear from people who've tried it, and they said it works out perfectly every time. And this is my own original recipe. I'm kneading the dough without adding any extra flour. You just have to be patient here. Start by kneading very gently. When you knead, you simply fold the dough over on itself and then push out gently with the heel of your hand. You want to knead until the dough becomes smooth and elastic. That's going to take about 10 minutes. Very often, people will ask me if they can make whatever bread I'm making in a bread machine, and the truth is, I don't know, because I do not own a bread machine. If at any point the dough becomes too sticky to knead, do this. Slam the dough down on your work surface. After 10 or 20 slams, the dough should be easier to work with. I think one of the mistakes that new bread bakers make is they keep adding flour while kneading the dough, and then the bread that results is very dry, very stiff. It maybe doesn't rise very well. So just take care not to add any extra flour and just be patient. This dough looks very smooth. It's been somewhere between 8 and 10 minutes of kneading. So it looks smooth. And here's one little test you can give the dough to see if it's kneaded enough. Pull out a piece, and if you can stretch it without tearing the dough is good to go. Now, I'm not even going to wash out this bowl. I'm simply going to grease it a little with some olive oil. Add the dough, and then flip the dough to grease the other side. Then cover the bread with either cling film or a damp towel, and then set this in a warm location and let the dough rise until doubled in volume. That's going to take 90 minutes to 2 hours. While the dough is rising, I'm going to clean up my workstation, and then we can get cracking on the granola. I am running very low on the granola that you and I made together a couple of weeks ago. So I made another batch at dawn this morning. And now I need to get that jarred up. But instead of using these wonderful twist-on lids, I'm going to vacuum seal mine with this neato gadget, and I cannot wait to demonstrate this for you. I will link the recipe for this granola in the description below, or you can just watch the video. We go through a lot of granola. The homemade version is not overly sweet, like the commercial version. It's just really delicious. In fact, it's downright addicting. So there's 1 quart. You put on the canning lid. Then you put the vacuum sealer on top, push it down, press this little button, and it will expel all of the air from the jar. You can actually hear the machine removing all of the air. There, we are vacuum sealed. If you use a regular twist-on lid, or if you put the granola in a Ziploc bag, it will stay good at room temperature for probably 2 or 3 weeks. This vacuum sealed granola will stay fresh and wonderful for a minimum of 1 year, possibly even 3 years. As you can see, it is totally sealed. Now you can put the rings on these jars if you wish, but you really don't have to. These are regular mouth mason jars, but this gadget also works with wide mouth mason jars. And I need to jar up some crackers. Mr. Fox and I don't eat a lot of crackers, but I do always serve them whenever we host a cocktail party, which is fairly frequently. So if you've ever opened a bag of crackers, eaten a few of them, and then had the rest left over, you know that even if you put them in a Ziploc bag, they go stale very quickly. To make sure they stay fresh and crisp almost indefinitely, seal them in a jar. Now, I'm using a wide mouth jar here, and to make this gadget work with a wide mouth jar, you simply turn this piece, pull it off, and voila, wide mouth. This vacuum sealer is obviously cordless. You charge it the same way you would charge a cell phone. and the charge lasts a considerably long time. I am going to link this in the description below. It's not an expensive thing, and for me, it's been a game changer. To show you how vacuum sealed this jar is, let's have a listen. I'm going to pry the lid off. It's really sealed. There. Did you hear the whoosh? And then you can always reseal even after you've removed the lid. Since this granola is going to go into my food storage pantry, I'm just going to reseal it. And we are resealed. Now you could vacuum seal not only granola and crackers, but dried fruit, breakfast cereals, rice, all kinds of things. We are still waiting for the bread to rise, so let's head out to the garden. I have some produce that's ready to harvest, and I need to preserve that produce. The tops of these red storage onions have fallen over, indicating that the onions are ready for harvest. We harvested 91 onions from just this one raised bed. Let's head down to the herb garden. Tree frogs like to hang out in the herb garden. I am happy to host them as they are downright adorable. Before I can store the onions, I need to cure them. To do this, I am placing the onions on the mesh table in my herb garden. The table will afford good air circulation for the bulbs. After 2 to 4 weeks, or when the onion skins turn papery and their green tops have shriveled, the onions will be ready for winter storage in my cellar. And while we are in the herb garden, we might as well harvest some of the bell peppers. I had to change my shirt because it is so humid outside. My shirt started sticking to my skin. So check out these peppers. I will deal with them later. Our dough has doubled in volume. So now I'm going to punch it down, put it on my marble board here, and then I'm going to pat it out just to remove all of the bubbles. Then I'm going to form the dough into a tight ball. So you just gather the corners, bring them to the middle of the dough. We're forming surface tension here, and then pinch the seams to seal them. Going to add a little more olive oil to the bowl. Set the dough seam side down in the greased bowl. Then dust the top with some flour. Once again, cover the bowl with a damp cloth or cling film. Meanwhile, preheat the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius and put a Dutch oven with its lid in the oven and let the pot preheat with the oven. I'm going to set this dough aside to let it double in volume, which this time will take 30 to 45 minutes. I'm going to wash all of these beautiful peppers, and then we can process them. Now, I have a lot more peppers where these came from, but I'm going to reserve a couple of the best shaped ones for stuffed peppers. And then I'm going to cut these up to freeze them. Now, with bell peppers, you do not have to blanch them before freezing. They freeze perfectly. The big question is whether you want to dice them or cut them into strips. I think I will cut these peppers into strips. This way the peppers will be ready for things like, fajitas. And I can assure you that once you have bell peppers in your freezer, you will use them all the time. This is the first garden produce that gets used up. So this was not the best year for garden produce. We had some pretty severe weather during the summer, but my peppers did very well. Let me know if you planted bell peppers and how they performed in your own garden. And if you don't have a garden, this would be a great time to buy bell peppers from a local farmer. If you go to a farmer's market and find the bell pepper farmer, you can ask him or her if you can buy peppers at a discounted rate if you buy in bulk. I'm going to hold off on bagging these for a moment because our dough has doubled in volume. Remember, this lid is red hot. And I'm going to flip the dough so that the seam side is on the top. Bake the covered dough for exactly 30 minutes. Well, we are certainly multitasking today. So now I'm going to bag up the peppers. This is one of the reusable silicone bags. I really love these things. You can wash them, reuse them indefinitely. Unfortunately, I only have one available right now because the others are holding produce in the freezer. I'm expressing as much air out of the bag as possible. I'm spreading out the peppers so the bag can lay flat in the freezer. Well, this is a nice beginning to the bell pepper preservation project. Again, I have many more peppers waiting in the garden. At this point, our beer bread has been in the oven for 30 minutes. Now I will uncover the pot and lower the oven temperature to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I will let the bread bake until the crust browns and splits at the seam, about 10 minutes. This is a gorgeous bowl. Oh, it's done. It's beautifully browned. Now, of course, I have to let this cool completely before I can cut into it. And I will use this later in the week when we do our crostini and a cocktail party. To close out this video, I'm going to make something for tonight's simple supper, and I'm going to use some of the vegetables that we harvested. In a skillet, I am sautéing in avocado oil one of our red onions, and a handful of our bell pepper strips. For seasonings, I am adding salt, pepper, and dried Italian seasoning. And while the onions and peppers are sauteing, I'm going to slice part of a baguette horizontally in half. Put this on a baking sheet, give it a drizzle of olive oil. Then I'm dividing the veggie mixture among the two halves of the baguette. And in a perfect world, I would finish these with some grated mozzarella, but I don't have any, so I'm using Gouda cheese. Gouda, which a lot of people pronounce as Gouda. And since my oven is already preheated to 400 degrees, I'm going to pop this into the oven just until the baguette crisps and the cheese melts. All this needs is a little garnish of fresh, fragrant basil. And supper is served. I love a supper that does not require a fork or a knife. Oh, this is irresistible and so fresh tasting. Well, we certainly accomplished a lot in just a few hours today. We made beer bread, we harvested vegetables, we preserved some of the vegetables, we even made a simple supper. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. You cannot possibly imagine how much I appreciate your company. I can pop a couple of videos up here that you can watch between now and my next upload. Until then, take good care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video. Chin chin.